All right. So let's. I feel like I'm like on CNN. I'm just going to interview you. So let me start with your pathway. If you could quickly, just how did you ascend to the superintendency?
Okay, thank you, Michael, and it's an honor to be here today. So thanks for the opportunity to be on stage with you. I've been superintendent. This is my 7th year in Pickens County. I was principal at 3 different high schools, and so I've been mostly in Pickens County all my life. And so we, as a district, we have 16,300 students. We have 4 high school attendance areas, and we have 2,040 employees. And so that's our demographics from a big picture macro standpoint. So that's how I arrived. I taught for 9 years, and so I have not been in a classroom in about 20 years. And so it's easy to lose touch. And so I do try to go to each school every year to hear. And my wife is a teacher, so it's easy to hear a different perspective on everything. And so I think it's important for us, Mike, to get to the classroom and to make sure that we're understanding exactly what's going on. And so over the last few years, I've tried to make sure I visit every school at least once or twice a year just to hear. So that's kind of my story, and that's kind of where I am.
I appreciate that. Real quick for me, Danny, I started out as an elementary teacher. Actually, I started out as a substitute teacher, and I'm still recovering from that. That is probably one of the hardest jobs anybody can have. You would think it would scare away people from becoming a teacher, but it had the opposite effect on me. So I was in elementary school for a while, and then so I was at the elementary level as a principal, middle school principal too. And then, yeah, I've been a superintendent. This is the end of my 9th year as a superintendent. Lovely. It's an amazing, it's an honor and a privilege to be a superintendent. I think you would agree with that. Right now I'm on Long Island. Stephanie was saying very close to New York City. I'm kind of a stone's throw away. I'm on the north shore of Long Island in Nassau County in Port Washington. Before that, I was in a previous school district, much different demographic. Not as large as your school district, Danny, where I'm in Port Washington, we're around 5,800 students. And before that, I was around 8,000 students. That's pretty typical out here on Long Island. But I have to say, I love what I do. It's a real privilege, like I said before. And we are in a time and space that I don't think any of us ever envisioned. And before we get there, and we could talk about maybe some of the things that we're grappling with, let's go back in time, and I'm going to ask you about Finland. You know, you've been there, right? It's if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us your experience there, and then what you have done since you came back, and what you're looking to do.
Okay, thank you, Mike. I went to Finland in October 2018, so it's been a while since I went over there. We had 3 different groups to go over since that time. So my trip was one, then 2 others. And then in December of 2019, this past year, we had 14 professors come over from Oulu, Finland, Oulu University, and they provided professional development for about 700 teachers. And so I think it made a tremendous impact on the culture of our county just to see and hear from the Finnish professors and teachers. What I saw, and you read it in the textbooks and you read it in the different books and you see it on YouTube, but when you actually go over there and you see first graders riding their bikes to school for a mile, when you see the CTE, the Career and Technology Education, in 1st and 2nd grade, when you see first graders sitting at lunch without a teacher, you can read that in a book and think, nah, I don't really think that's real. And then you get over there and you get a dose of it, and then you see the joyful learning, you see the deep learning, and then all of a sudden you see kids outside all the time. And then the 45-15, which is a national standard for grades 3K through 8th grade. It just kind of blew me away that this is one of the leading countries in the world, and they're the happiest country. And so And instead of just going over there and learning from it, I came back kind of a changed person. And you go on mission trips to change other people. I felt like this was a mission trip that changed me. And so I came back and I haven't been the same since. And you want that for your kids. You want that for your students. You want that for your teachers, to have that joy. And you know, in America, we have so much testing. And how do we infuse our cultures in New York and Pickens County with what we saw in Finland? And so I keep asking that question. And we had some great people go over there, and some great teachers. And we were, before March yet, Michael, we were going to make the reward for a district teacher a year a chance to go to a Finnish conference. And then everything in the world was perfect in February. Our teachers were getting a $3,000 raise, a step increase, everything. And then all of a sudden, every great idea and innovative idea we had about going to Finland or anything else was just stopped. And so there's still some great lessons that we take with us, from positivity to early childhood to play. And it just reinforced the relationship that I have with Stephanie and what Clemson University is doing. And they've been in our schools for PD. And I sincerely appreciate that. But had I not gone to Finland, I don't think my perspective would be where it is today. And we talk about character and we talk about citizenship, and we go over there and we see it firsthand because it's integrated into everything that they do with the children at an early age. And what we're going through in America, I think, is even more important now than ever, to go after character, to go after social emotional, to go after good citizens, and make that a focus when we return. So hope I didn't ramble, hope I didn't say too much, but you and I can talk about this all day.
Well, yeah, there's no doubt. And I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I think we were in Finland the same time, which, how funny is that? And we didn't even know it. We may have even crossed pathways. That's really amazing. I share with my friends, Danny, that it changed my my educational soul when I went there. You know, and I think I may have said this to you earlier. You know, when you read something like you're saying, it's very one-dimensional. When you go there and you experience it, it really becomes three-dimensional. You know, it's really, you have no choice but for it to become part of your DNA. If it aligns, I think, with your own core values as far as what you think children need and deserve. And like you, when I saw first graders riding their bicycles to school, sometimes as far as a half-mile away. If that happened in New York, they would be arrested, right? We see kids in Finland climbing on trees, right? 10, 15 feet in the air. There would be 25 attorneys underneath that tree suing the school district. So it's a very different focus for sure. And I think that really hit me between the eyes. Their thoughts about wellness and what that means. Like, you know, when students enter, or I should say exit their system, what is the ultimate exit outcome? Like, what do they want for their kids? And certainly having kids standardized is not one of them, for sure. One of the things that really, I think, made me stop and think was, because I think like you, I saw how teachers are trained there. And my friend William Doyle, who set the trip up for me, and I had the opportunity to meet so many amazing, not only educators, but parents and students and people who actually made policy decisions. So to see what their thought process was at the time, the teachers are trained like NASA astronauts there, you know, as Bill Doyle would say, like, and they are, and they take it very seriously. What they do, how they do it is really remarkable. I think what struck me as well, aside from the, you know, the 45-minute, 15 construct they had, was, as you said, you know, I saw first graders with drills, right? They're creating things, and I'm like, how is that even possible? Or they're speaking 2 or 3 languages, right? By the time they're in 3rd grade. But I think what struck me was their school day is shorter, right? And in some instances, their school year may be shorter. Yet, when you look at what they do and when I say what they do, how they when students exit the system, whether they go the CTE pathway or they go to university pathway, if you care about PISA scores, if you care about international rankings, they do incredibly well. And everybody can say, well, you know, it's a very small country and it's for the most part homogeneous and this and that. But the reality is they're still doing some things that are really remarkable. And like you, I wanted to bring I did bring some things back to my previous school district, but this is my first year. And I really chose a great first year to enter a school district with the pandemic. But you know, you had all these great things planned pre-COVID. We were about to do a state of the district to really unveil what we were looking to move, a new vision, a new mission, a focus on wellness. And then that was all thrown out the window, you know, and you have to recalibrate, which is part of our job, right? We have to take things as they are when they come our way and make the most of it and plan at the same time. So what I'd like to do, if you don't mind, let's talk about, and I don't want this to be like a misery session as far as what we've had to deal with, but let's just say yesterday or today, like what does that day look like for you when it comes to decision making, conversations you've had? Like what does that look like for you?
Yeah, and typically what I'm doing right now is setting up my calendar with WebEx like 2 weeks ago. And so I'm trying to predict in 2 weeks who I need to have WebEx sessions with, video conferencing. And the big thing that we tried to do, Michael, in our school district is from the beginning, we made contact with every student. And you can't connect with WebEx with every child, but we tried. And our teachers did a great job of making phone calls the first 2 weeks to make sure that belonging was not sacrificed during this time. And so our beginning started very well. And so it made the end very effective as well, because we made sure that we made contact, whether it was getting food to the kids who needed it the most. And so now we're, the last graduation was a couple of weeks ago in Pickens County. And so we've had working groups talking about reentry for the last 6 weeks. And so as superintendent, I trust the people that are in charge of the working groups, and I'm staying in touch with them. So I'm trying to stay in touch with the board. I try to stay in touch with politicians, try to stay in touch with the State Department. And so we're trying to understand the different levels of complexity. Education was already complex. And now when you put restrictions on the number of students who can ride a bus, who can eat in a cafeteria at a time, determining cohorting, how many kids can be in a cohort, how many should be in a cohort, how are you going to trace exclusion policy, how many, if one kid comes down tested positive, what does that mean from the last week? How did you track that with your cohorts? And so all of those details, we're trying to work our way through that. And so we've studied New York, we've studied Indiana, we've studied North Carolina, Georgia, we've actually talked to Finland and Norway. And recently, Mike, and I just share this with you, the Canadian guidelines are wonderful. It's 11 pages, and the guidelines encourage elementary students to go outside. And it does say in the guidelines that they're not encouraging physical distancing for kids outside. They're wanting them to play and have a good time. And so the Canadian guidelines, I think, are tremendous. They're some of the best that I've seen. So part of my time has been researching and asking other leaders inside the county, and a lot of those are teachers, a lot of those are assistant principals, and they're reading all this research. And so it's just a great time. We're all learning from each other about what we should do. And the day is coming when we have to start making decisions. And so and we're starting to go public now on our decision making, whether it's a virtual academy or whatever. And we're starting to publicize that now. But it's been a wonderful experience for me, because I've been able to get to know people who are very interested in reentry from a lot of different perspectives. And so that's how I've been spending my time. And I feel like I'm on this WebEx all the time. And, and it's good in some ways, but in other ways, there's not a lot of, you don't have 10 or 15 people talking, but you do have sometimes 80 to 100 listening.
Yep.
And so you have to find a way to get people's opinion and not just listen to the talking. So we're trying to do that as well, but that's a little bit difficult right now.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like, you're right. We are spending so much time in front of a computer screen, which is one of my biggest concerns for our kids, right? Trying to find that balance as far as them spending so much time in front of a computer screen. I am not in favor of that, at all. And we want our kids, like you believe, like I'm happy to hear Canada believes, they want their kids outside as often as possible. We had a meeting, and I think some of the members are here right now from the Global Recess Alliance. We were talking about a few things earlier this week. And so if you are here, nice to see you all. I'm saying y'all now like I'm from South Carolina. I like that a lot. We talked about, the focus of what children are learning now, as opposed to what they're not learning. Like this narrative of a deficit model, kids are, not learning a lot, and they're very concerned come September that they will be very behind because from mid-March on, they may not have had the rigorous instructional component there. But there are so many other things that they have learned during this time that in some cases I would think you can't even measure, right? Some of the things, it's like when I say to my wife, and I don't think she's listening to this, so I can say it, even though it's being recorded, when she says, how much, do you love me? And I say this much, I'm like, it's hard to quantify how much I love you. And some of these things that I'm talking about that are not quantifiable are what kids are learning, such as resiliency, such as decision-making, as far as their imagination, their creativity. I don't want to put a metric on that, but I can tell you, if and when they're not in front of a computer screen and or they're outside and they're exploring and things they never had time to do before, but they're doing it now, it's a real great thing. And I would love to see more of us as superintendents and superintendents of schools and policymakers try to change this narrative of, I can't believe these kids are, it's such a terrible thing. And I'm not saying the pandemic isn't terrible, because it is. But there are things that are happening that we need to continue to move forward, that I would love to see move forward. But one of the things I'm concerned about, and I know you are, is recess. Recess and play, and self-directed play for me in particular, as far as I don't want to see those things fall by the wayside because we're so hyper concerned about all of these other things. So if you don't mind me asking you, Danny, what are your thoughts about recess as we re-enter school? And from what you're thinking and feeling at this particular moment in June, which may be much different come August, what are you thinking as far as what would recess potentially look like? Will it take place? How can it take place? Because those are the questions that I'm hearing often.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And like I told my school board in March, I'm going to be open and honest with you, but things are going to change every 24 hours. So what I tell you now may change in a week
That's
or
right.
two, because we're going on a journey together, and we must trust each other on a journey. And that's where we've been for the last 3 months, is a journey, and it's going to continue to be a journey till the first day of school. And so I think, and the Canadian guidelines gave me a lot of hope. It's 11 pages, it's very succinct, and it gives you the research on the why. And so, and it encourages hygiene breaks. And so when we talk about going outside, it encouraged 5 hygiene breaks during a day. And if you think about, the Finnish model of 45-15, I don't know how much of that we can do, but I do not consider recess to be a transition. So if teachers or principals are worried about transitions, I would encourage a hygiene break and recess to go together, and to take as many of those as you can during a day, because we would encourage outdoor learning. We would encourage free play and encourage recess at every level so that they can, especially at elementary, so that they can spend more time outside. And I've never viewed recess or play since I've been back from Finland the same way. And I view it in the lens of more of a mental health, social trauma, learning how to become or have better character, be a good citizen. And you're learning the routine of going outside and coming in. And as you go out, you're cleaning your hands. As you're coming in, you're cleaning your hands. You can go to the restroom. We may not have water fountains. That's one of the things that's we're looking at, and I think America's looking at, is having water stations instead of water fountains.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're learning a new way of doing things with recess. And so to me, I just see it as an opportunity to take on the SELBs. And because student-to-student relationships are going to be critical, just like student-to-teacher relationships. And going outside and playing is going to be an integral part. And so we're certainly not going to encourage less recess in Pickens County. And if we can find a way to do more, we would certainly encourage that, because I think that's needed.
Yeah, I would agree with you. One of my biggest concerns with our students who are coming back definitely has to do with mental health and the trauma they may have experienced, and certainly the stress, the toxic stress they have experienced. And to be honest with you, our parents as well. You know, when you think of the economic climate, and you know, if there are two parents who are working and they both, or one of them lost their job, what that means, you know, for the family and the things that they've had to deal with and contend with, aside from if they know anybody, God forbid, if they were sick, we have to be prepared for that edge that comes our way. And so some of the things we're focusing on, Danny, where we are is, you know, clearly I think many of us know the ACEs study and what that means, and looking for indicators and so on and so forth. And so it comes down to a lot of professional development for our staff, so they can be ready to assist in any way that we can. You know, we can't be so hyper-focused, not to say it's not important, but I think you said it a lot more eloquently than I did. It's the social and emotional growth that is really, it's really foundational. It's like, you know, not to bore anybody with Maslow, but it's true. If those basic needs are not being met, I don't care who you are, it's very hard to learn anything, especially if it's in a new type of environment, whether it's a hybrid environment and or, you know, just the school day just may look different if and when everybody does come back for the first time. So yeah, when we think about Maslow, we cannot forget about those basic needs, especially when it comes to relationships, as you said, love and trust, and making sure kids are fed. We've had, at least in my school district, which is a pretty well-off school district, but we have pockets of families who had little to no resources and weren't able to find food. So I'm sure you did as well, right? You're providing food for kids and all those different things. And we can't forget about that as we re-enter and just hyper-focus on ELA and mathematics and science and social studies. Not to say, again, it's not important, but that shouldn't be what gets us up in the morning, I don't think, at least in September, where we are in New York. And I believe, is it August where it is in South Carolina? Is that when school starts for everybody?
Yes, we're starting August 10th is our start day, and unless something changes in Columbia, but that's
yeah. Well, it's funny. So, you know, our governor, and for many New Yorkers, there's a love affair with our governor right now. We call him the pandemic governor, because he has these daily, you know, sessions of, you know, updating everybody. But what we have found, and I think he's done a really nice job of, you know, making sure that from a metric standpoint, everybody's informed. But as school systems are concerned, very little consultation with educators. So these edicts will come out on a Sunday evening and they go into effect on Monday morning without us really knowing about it. And then we are left to pick up the pieces to contend with that. And so the reason why I'm sharing that, hope he's not watching this, by the way. Actually, no, I hope he is watching this, so he doesn't do it again. The fact of the matter is, the state education department I believe plays a real critical role in allowing us as superintendents and boards of education to make informed decisions very quickly. And so the sooner we receive guidance for us to be able to unpack and understand, it allows us to devise these plans so we know it fits within those parameters, especially when it comes to what we're talking about with recess and play. Have you, from the State Education Department in South Carolina, have you received a lot of guidance recently as far as what's going to happen?
The State Department just came out with their guidance. It's 202 pages. And, in South Carolina, we're controlled by DHEC instead of the CDC. And DHEC tells us about exclusion, and we won't receive exclusion exact priorities until July 1. So we can't announce our final version or our final district plan until at least July 3rd. And so we're kind of waiting on that, because until you know what happens when one person tests positive, whether it's a student or employee, you must know who else is impacted. And so we're waiting on exclusion before we say, here's a final plan. And I've read some exclusion policies in other states, and there's no way you can have school because the entire class goes home or the entire grade level goes home. And so that's why we're going to have a plan, and we've been working for 6 weeks, and we'll continue to work. But if the exclusion recommendations, or if it's a mandate that you take out the entire class or grade level when someone tests positive, that influences everything. So yeah, that's why we can make the best plans, but we're still dependent upon the exclusion that's given to us by DHEC, and they've given us a little bit. But we certainly don't have everything. And so we're coming back in small groups right now. But as far as larger groups, it will be August 10th before we're all coming back. And we're hoping by that time a miracle occurs. But if not, we are where we are. We've got two big choices for parents. They can go to the virtual academy, or they can come to a school that's probably going to have a few less, maybe 10% less students. But for the most part, we expect 90% to be in our schools.
Wow. Where we are, we have a board of regents and a commissioner. And right now what they're doing is they're soliciting input from stakeholders around New York State. They started at that about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks ago, and they should conclude sometime mid-July. And we start school, I believe, on September 2nd, which doesn't give us much time then to really make sure that we are in alignment. So what many school districts are doing, I believe in New York, is they're devising their own or creating their own plans based on what they know to be true at this particular moment, which is, in some cases kind of hard to do. But I think there are some things that we know can happen, right? So there are a few different scenarios. We don't come back at all. We continue what we're doing, and it's total distance learning, total remote learning, or there's the potential of a hybrid model, right? Which I think, boy, there's so many unintended consequences when it comes to a hybrid model that it would take us probably 3 sessions to unpack what they are, right? And then everyone comes back, but clearly there are some things provisions we would have to create and make sure everyone is safe and all that good stuff. So let me ask you, Danny, if you don't mind, distance learning for where you are, what are some of the pros that you saw as far as maybe some of the things that you thought worked out really well? Some of the things that, not that we're playing Monday morning quarterback, especially not in Clemson country, where you do have a ridiculous quarterback, and I hope he goes to the Jets. But anyway, so some things that you're considering maybe tweaking for next year, if and when there is, if and when this does happen again, there is even a second wave, things that you learned along the way.
Yeah, that's one of our big questions about the preparation. What lessons did we learn the first time so that the second time we're doing a better job? And we feel like, we've talked about this, the general public gave us a break the first time because it just came on us and we didn't have time to prepare, and we did the best we could, and our teachers did a great job. The second wave, I'm thinking that the parents are going to be asking for a little bit more organization on our part, and we're trying to deliver that. And the connectivity, I mean, we didn't have Chromebooks for some of our early learners. The packets, we don't feel like were beneficial. So we do think that it's best to have Chromebooks, even for the early learners. And so that's one of our big takeaways is it seemed like the learning was much better with the Chromebooks versus the packets. And so Michael, we had gone down a road 3 years ago. We were one of 5 school districts selected for inclement weather doing e-learning. So we feel like our teachers were already introduced to this, so it wasn't something completely new. But the idea of doing asynchronous versus synchronous, we feel like we have to dig into both, and we feel like majority of the teachers did a great job with synchronous. We think we need to dive into asynchronous, and we think some subjects lend themselves to synchronous, and then some subjects lend themselves to asynchronous. But trying to figure out where related arts fits in at the different levels, 5K to second grade, upper elementary, middle school, and high school. Related arts has a different story for each one. Some of those may be synchronous, some of those may be asynchronous. But the idea of doing well checks and just making sure that we know you're okay,
Yep.
and you're being fed, taking care of belonging, taking care of Maslow, as you've already discussed, making sure that that's our first priority, even with virtual learning. That's one of our big takeaways, is that when we said the first 2 weeks, we're just going to make sure you're okay, we had no idea how big that determined the entire experience. And so we didn't do everything perfectly, but I'm very proud of our teachers because the vast majority, 80 to 90%, did a wonderful job. And so I'm just pleased as superintendent for what they did to represent us. And so those are my few takeaways. And hopefully, as a superintendent, I do a little bit better job next time of making sure that we're better organized. And so we've been working on that.
Yeah, that's my experience where we were building a plane as we're flying it. It was, boy, oh boy, you talk about accelerating a learning curve, right? In so many different ways. I will say my community had very high expectations, and understandably so. We didn't have a one-on-one initiative, so our students didn't have a device. So we had to, from the school, I should say. So we had to figure out how, in a very short period of time, develop professional development for our teachers, which of course is one of the most important things, right? So because it's such a continuum as far as skill sets. You have some some teachers who they're like Tron, they could jump into the computer and do everything, right? They're just so advanced. And then you have some, and I love them to death, but they have a difficult time turning on a computer, right? So you have the extremes, and what you have to do in a compressed timeline is to make sure that they have the skill sets in order to have synchronous or asynchronous types of learning experiences. And so we had to then, on top of that, make sure that all of our kids had a machine. So whether it's a Chromebook or an iPad. Wi-Fi access was very difficult for some of our families, so it didn't matter if we had synchronous or asynchronous types of learning, if they couldn't access it. So we had to move that along. And then what we did was we developed it in 2 phases, because we were learning in 2-week increments, like I'm sure you were here in South Carolina. For the first 2 weeks, we're thinking we're coming back week 3.
Yeah.
We didn't know we would be out, and nobody had tea leaves in front of them, to see, the way they would fall. So we're thinking it's more of a review as opposed to introducing, new content for students to learn. And then not knowing at the time, the standardized tests in New York take place in April, May-ish. So we didn't know if that was still taking place. So, our teachers, trying to prepare them for the tests, which I don't agree with, but that's a whole nother conversation. And so once those things were lifted, it gave teachers a little more freedom. But the reality is, the one thing I heard more than anything else was contact time with the teacher. That connection piece with the teacher was critically important, whether it's a wellness check, whether it's a small group conversation, or whether the teacher is addressing the whole class. By far, that is the one thing that we will make sure in our school district next year, that we figure out a way to make that happen as often as possible. But also, I shouldn't say but, because that negates everything I just said. I will say, and making sure we keep in mind the screen time of kids. I don't want teaching to take place for 6 hours a day every day. Because the expectation for some parents may be, they want teachers like climbing through the ropes, dropping from the ceiling, and then teaching the kids like they were in school for 6 hours a day. No, it's not happening. And I actually think it's just not just a good idea. But we do have to find a balance, I think, come September. And I think the hybrid model, which I think is probably the most likely construct, is giving us the most fits. And then I'll turn it over to you, Danny, as far as what your thoughts are about this. I've had 5 meetings before this conversation already. So 5 meetings talking about a whole host of things, but one of them had to do with not just our reentry plan, but about the different scenarios and what that will look like. So just like you, we're looking at other countries, looking at other states as far as what they're doing. We're actually looking at North Carolina, what they have in place right now. It seems like it's pretty comprehensive. But the hybrid model is causing a lot of concerns for our teachers, because there's a child care issue, right? So if you go to a 4-day learning week or AB day, the fact of the matter is you're still going to have students who have to be at home. And for many of our teachers, I'm sure this is a nationwide thing, that means their kids will be at home. And then childcare becomes a real issue during these times. And so we're trying to grapple with what that means for the educator. All in the same context of trying to end the year. Our year is just ending right now, school year. And so we're doing the graduation thing right now and planning for September at the same time, which is exhausting, like and then trying to, figure out what every decision that you make has unintended consequences. And we usually stop at 4 or 5. We don't look at number 15 or 16, to figure out what that may be. But that's usually what comes up like a month from now, because we didn't think of it at that time. So, and I think it's important for the audience to know that there's a lot of thought that goes into place. There are a lot of scenarios that you try to workshop, but in the end, nothing will be perfect. And if you keep the child at the center of all of the decisions that we're making, then I'm hoping all of our communities know that we're doing the best that we can. So I guess I'd like to maybe end with, because we have 15 minutes left. This is maybe an unfair question, Danny, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because I'm doing it remotely and you can't do anything about it. So let's say things go back to normal. Let's say there is no second wave. We're past January and we're into February right now. And you're thinking about the new school year for the following year as you're developing your budget. Of all the things that you've learned over the past, let's say at that point, it'll be a year, almost a year. Is there anything that you would like to shift in some way that you never thought about before as you're looking to re-enter the following, not next year, the following school year, because of all the things that have transpired? Or is there anything that you'd like to do?
I guess the biggest area with personalized learning, we were attempting to attack personalized learning over the last couple of years. And you try to gradually, in public education, you don't want to wear teachers out, you don't want to wear parents out. And so we went after a waiver in our state, and we thought, well, we may get parts of it, and we actually got the entire waiver, which gave us a lot of flexibility to do personalized learning. And then this hit, and we're doing more personalized learning now than ever, but because of what happened. And so when we talk about personalized learning, we're really just trying to give kids more opportunities and teachers more opportunities to be innovative and to do what's best for them and teach in a way that produces joyful learning and allow the students to learn in a way that's best for them. And so taking that another step, I think learning to WebEx the way the teachers have has allowed us to move the needle and go a lot further down that road with personalized learning, which is going to increase opportunities. And Mike, I read yesterday 110,000 businesses closed and are not going to open back up. And from a macro standpoint, what that does to the economy and what the tax revenue is going to look like, at least for 3 years. And so we have to think about that. So we have to think about how do we use virtual to save money and to be more effective, but also be more efficient. And so in the back of my mind, we only had 7 teachers to retire this year, and we don't have a teacher shortage. And so, we're in a great position as far as culture and keeping teachers. And so we want to keep that. We don't want to lose that, but we want to continuously build them so that they can be adaptable in this new world that's requiring more choices for the children at all ages. And so, I come down to 2 words with personalized learning. And it's kind of where I land with that question.
Yeah, for me, and thank you, Danny. I love that, and I agree with all of it. For me, in a let's just say, I'll call it a post-pandemic world, when we move on, you think of the lessons that have been learned, and there's so many of them. I will say, for me, as a school district, I would love for us to really focus on and making it the number one priority within our school system, a focus on wellness. And when I say a focus on wellness, there are so many different edges that are attached to it, but I will say the journey within. I think we've been so conditioned to focus on these external things, whether it's content, whether it's the way we assess, and we should continue to do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but we have to, I think, do a much better job with mental health. The statistics are staggering when it comes to the percentage of our students and how it's becoming younger and younger, that they're more anxious, depressed, and in some cases suicidal than any generation before. And what are some things that we can do in school systems to try to mitigate that as much as we can? And so the focus on wellness and kids flourishing when they leave here, and to arm them with skills that they can use for the rest of their lives. The way to empathize, the way to recalibrate if something doesn't go their way. Simple things like breathing and all these different things that seem so simple, yet they're so profound. And I think from a finish standpoint, Danny, it's the paradox of less is more. We don't have to cram 100 pounds of stuff in a 10-pound bag, right? So we need to start looking at what we have, I believe, and start looking through like our closets and getting rid of the shirts we haven't worn in a very long time, right? Which I've been doing for the past 3 months, and really start taking a very hard look at what's important to us and redefining what our core values are and what we want for our kids after they exit the system after 14,000 hours of being in it. And so I would love for us to take a hard look at that. And I can't think of a better time than now to do it. And of course, I believe play is at the center of much of this play-based learning, the power of recess, as we both totally are in congruence with, and how that is, I've said this many times, recess is on the endangered species list and soon to be extinct if we don't do something about it soon, right? And you know, this, my fear, Danny, is this is a great opportunity for those who don't believe in recess to make it extinct, because they will come at people or communities with the fact that it's not safe, and we have to focus on other things instead. So those are the things that I'm grappling with, aside from my sport teams at home, which are horrible. But you know, I don't know what it is about South Carolina, but the New York teams, as of the past decade, boy, they're borderline horrific.
Oh, yeah. It's, Clemson is right here, so I'm a big Tiger fan, and we've had a lot of success. So we're hoping they play a little football this fall. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. You know, Stephanie, I'm not sure. I think we have about a few minutes left. I wasn't sure if you wanted to allow a question or two, or if you just wanted us to end early. It's totally up to you.
Yeah, I would love to give folks an opportunity to ask a question. If you want to say something in the chat box. I had someone who asked about the blended approach, and I guess that question was answered, talking about the synchronous or asynchronous blended approach. Does anyone else have something they want to ask of these two fine gentlemen? Question from Ryan, who actually is out of Canada.
Oh, wow.
Canada, and he is one of our guys that is helping us up there. What do you want other leaders in education from across the country to know about the importance of well-being within the education system come this fall?
I would, from my standpoint, and I did talk to some of the Finnish professors about this a couple of weeks ago. TCU has a wonderful series on trauma, and it's actually used in Finland. And it's 5 hours, and it's free right now. And it educates you every level of mental health that you can think about. It is your mindset about children. And it teaches you to not react to the kids' discipline, and allows you to work through that and try to build the child. And it goes through 5 hours of how to deal with trauma. And what I've seen, Stephanie, and I've been all over the country, talked to superintendents in almost every state, the number of large issues, discipline issues, are growing at a younger age. We're watching that in 3K, 4K, 5K. It's happening across every level. And so this problem isn't going away, and it's not by zip code. Every district in the country is struggling with behaviors at an earlier age. And so we're going to have to deal with trauma in a different way in the next 10 years, or the problems are just going to increase. And so being outside and play and learning how to get along with others and learning how to solve our problems and how to see the problems was explained so wonderfully by TCU in that series on trauma. So I would encourage anybody to be able to take those 5 hours. It's free through August. And Tammy Durham here in Pickens County, she's been wonderful at exposing our teachers to those sessions. So that's my advice. I don't know, Mike, if you have any better ideas.
I don't know. I think, you know, the more, because I mean, I think you would agree with this, Danny, you know, our jobs now, I mean, they weren't 24/7, maybe they were 27, you know, 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, or, you know, depending, it is ebb and flow to the year, but now it's 24/7 for sure, you know, certainly over the past several months. But it's given me a lot of time to reflect on what the purpose of education is, and why we're here, aside from, you know, it's by law, of course, that kids have to learn. But I would say I've become reacquainted with Dr. Marty Seligman's work at a UPenn, and his work with flourishing and what that looks like, positive psychology. I think now more than ever, our educators and the students we are serving deserve to know more about that and what that means and what that entails. But in the end, I think many of us have lost sight of why our kids are in school and what we want for them. And I think that model out of UPenn provides a really concrete outline and framework as far as what that means from a positive relationship standpoint to collaboration standpoint. All those, I hate to say soft skills, I don't like that word soft skills. It takes away from the real power of what they are. They're essential skills that our children will need. And we need to, I think, spend a lot more time focusing on that as opposed to ranking and sorting kids and teachers based on test scores.
Well, I don't know that that seems to be sort of a drop the mic moment at this point. But you'll see in the chat box, hopefully folks will see there a lot of people are sharing the links. So the link to the PHE Canada guidelines, the link to the TCU stuff, the link to the Global Recess Alliance. You could save that chat box by clicking on the three dots just next to file within that chat box. So please feel free to do that. And this has been such a tremendous opportunity. I'm grateful to you both for sharing your distinct yet similar insights on what's going on right now in education. You both give me a lot of hope for our children, and hopefully more people can hear the good word that you guys are spreading. And I'm just thankful for your time and energy, and appreciate you being with us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you, and thank you to Danny. It's always a pleasure. I've learned so much, not only from him, but he is a tremendous leader, and his school district is really fortunate to have him.